All right, hey, what's up, guys? All right, I'm right here in Lower Manhattan today, guys. Gonna give you guys a special tour. This is kind of a redo, but this is more specifically gonna give you the colonial history of Lower Manhattan. You guys are gonna get a History 101 about New York, huh? The beginnings. You can use this on your, on your walks with your friends and family. Really impress them. Make them think you're not wasting your time here in New York City. Anyways, before we start, Cam, how the hell are you?
Hot.
It's hot as hell, baby. That's why I got this towel here. Woo, man, it is hot. We're gonna suffer it for you guys, though. Speaking of which, guys, if you like the videos you've seen in the past, check out the Patreon. That's how we fund these things. Some extras on there. Also, like and subscribe. That's a big deal. And you know what? If you like it, tell a friend. That's another big way to go back to word of mouth, huh? IRL days. But aside from that, guys, I'm rambling. We got a lot to cover today. We're gonna stop at a lot of different things. I'm gonna show you a little map. You can rebuild this tour yourself for all your friends, and then pretend like you knew it all yourself to begin with. That's okay. I'm used to it. All right, what do you think, Cam? Should we do this? Let's go, baby. So let's start at the beginning. 1609. That's the year that a man named Henry Hudson, English guy, hired by the Dutch East India Company at the time to find a route to India. This was his third attempt to try to find a route. And he comes down up the east coast of the United States, and he pops in here to what is today the Hudson River, and he goes all the way up, thinking he found it. He found the way through, but then he finds the land of milk and honey and exotic spices, Albany. He failed. He comes on the way out, he goes all the way back, but on his stop, he actually stops through here, and he talks to the Native Americans. He sees there's tons of wildlife and fauna, and then he goes back and he reports to the Dutch East India Company, hey, I didn't find a route to India, but I did find this sick harbor with tons of animals, really cool, guys. And they go, hey, Henry, that's great, man, really, really great, but you're fired. You suck at your job. So he goes off, but they say, hey, you know what? There's actually beavers there. We need beaver pelts for the fancy hats everyone's wearing these days. So let's go settle. And actually the first permanent European settler or European descended settler comes here and settles, in 1613, the most Dutch name you could possibly think of, Juan Rodriguez. Yeah, that's right. So if you ever meet a guy named Juan, be like, Juan, is that Dutch? And you'll get a good laugh. Anyways, he settles. 1625, they charter New Amsterdam. They charter New Amsterdam here at the southern tip of Manhattan. That's why we're here. You can see the Hudson River behind me, named after Henry Hudson. Kind of cool. So Henry Hudson, by the way, he goes off and he tries to find for the fourth time a route to India. He was actually told initially to go through the Arctic Circle. He disobeyed, and that's how he stumbled on this area. The fourth time's the charm. He actually goes through the Hudson Bay, what's named Hudson Bay today, and he is killed. Basically, his crew mutinies, send him off on a dinghy with his son, and he dies. Pretty cool. Way to go. But you know what? In all fairness, he has lots of cool stuff named after him today. The Hudson River, Hudson Bay. My middle school classmate, Deidre Hudson. Yeah, all those things, pretty not bad for failure. So yeah, anyways, this is where it all begins. Hudson River. We're gonna keep this moving, baby. We got a lot of places to cover. Let's go. All right, so we talked about Hudson getting here, but when he came here, he encountered the Native Americans. There was actually a lot of Lenape natives here when he came by. They're part of the Algonquin Nation. Anyways, that's what was going on here in this part of the Northeast. He actually encountered them, and one of his crew got shot through the neck with an arrow. Boys will be boys. But anyways, in 1625, chartered New Amsterdam, right? So in 1626, the Director General of New Amsterdam at the time, his name was Peter Minuit, had the purchase of New York, I guess, or Manhattan. By the way, Manhattan is derived from Mannahatta, which is the Lenape word they believe for land of many hills. Yeah, there you go, a little vocab for you. So next time you're out in Colorado skiing with your friends, be like, hey, Colorado is a real Mannahatta to your friends. And they'll be like, hey, shut the up. Anyways, this behind me is the actual flagpole where they commemorate that. You have the Peter Minuit. It's covered in frickin' scaffolding. They're doing a bunch of construction. New York's gonna be a great place when they finally finish it. But I'll insert CGI here. So he buys the land of Mannahatta and all that for what they say is 60 guilders. That's the only record of it. And it's been what's it when you exchange? The exchange rate, I guess, has been said to be $24, which is an arbitrary number, and it's not correct. fact, Edwin Burroughs and Mike Wallace in the book Gotham, which you should check out. There you go, plugging other books. They actually say it's closer to a few $100. Either way, the Native Americans got ripped off in a New York minuet, you know. Actually, interesting fact, back in the day, the Native Americans didn't really think of property the same way. What they actually bought with was what was called like trinkets, whatever, but also wampum. Wampum was like beads and stuff like that that they actually turned into currency. The Native Americans didn't really think of them as currency until the colonists used it that way. Yeah, straight like beads and stuff. So that means that the guy you knew in high school who would always wear puka shell necklaces and drive his car with his shirt off, that guy would probably be a real estate mogul back then. But anyways, they bought it from them, and the Native Americans didn't really have an idea of private property. They believed in like sharing and everything. So when they were given all this stuff in exchange for the island, they kind of were like, what the hell are you talking about? How does that even work? But they're like, yeah, sure, give us your money. It's fine. Sadly though, they found out pretty quickly what the colonists were talking about, and not in a good way. And when they bought the island of Manhattan and they bought this area, they'd actually moved from what was nearby Governor's Island to come to the bigger island and bought the colony here. Lots of purchases happening in Brooklyn and Queens and all that stuff as well later on, but this was kind of the first big one, 1626, and this flagpole commemorates it. Whew, baby, we're flying, and it's hot. All right, so we covered Henry Hudson, then we covered the incorporation of New Amsterdam. So now I'm standing in front of the Alexander Hamilton Customs House, which is where Fort Amsterdam was located. So this was made a colony for the Dutch East India Company and then the Dutch West India Company, which was made to actually look over the new Netherland settlement here in the New World for the Dutch. A lot of newness, huh? Anyways, the Fort Amsterdam is built here, and that's where the actual Director General would have come and worked and brought his briefcase and his BlackBerry and Lunchables or whatever you bring. I don't know what people bring when they have important jobs, but he would have come here to work. And in 1647, that man was Peter Stuyvesant, who took over. He was a soldier, real tough guy. He actually had his leg blown off in a battle in the Caribbean and actually walked around on a peg leg. He's a freaking cartoon character, man. But yeah, he actually existed, and he would have come over here to take over for this guy, Willem Kieft, who had a disastrous war with the Native Americans. The whole colony was in disarray. He takes over and works from here. He whips the colony into shape, and you know, back then it was just a bunch of drunks, like people just walking around drunk all the time. You know, before he took over. I guess if you walk around the Lower East Side today on a weekend night, you would have think Peter Stuyvesant never made it here. It's a giant frat party. Anyways, he came over, whips the colony into shape, so much so that by 1664, the British take notice. Ooh, what's gonna happen? Pretty crazy. I'm gonna talk about this a little more, but this is where Fort Amsterdam would have been located. Also where later, under the British, Fort George would have been located. I can't spend too much time. We're trying to cover the colonial history here. So let's keep it moving. All right, so Stuyvesant did some stuff. Remember, he whipped the colony into shape, basically cracked down on all the drinking. Believe it or not, at one point it was safer to drink the alcohol here than it was the water. So he curbs the drinking, but he also built a wall here on Wall Street. 1653, builds a wall. That's why it's called Wall Street. How crazy is that? It's actually to protect the colony from the British, believe it or not. Huge rivalries building up between the Dutch and the British. Remember, the British are the ones who are settling all the area around New York in New England, huh? New Netherland, New Amsterdam, New England. Whoa, look at that. Oh, oysters, crabs, oh, how cool. So there were lots of tensions brewing with those sneaky Brits, huh? Bloody wankers, they are. So what's gonna happen? Who knows? Only one way to find out, and that is to get the hell out of the sun and keep it moving. I'm roasting, baby. I can feel the melanomas coming up on my skin. I shouldn't joke about that, that's terrible. All right, let's keep it moving. Hope not to get skin cancer. So the British get more involved. In 1664, they come here to the port of New Amsterdam and they politely propose to the Dutch, in return for your colony of New Amsterdam, we will forego murdering everyone. Give us that sweet colony, baby. Naturally, Peter Stuyvesant, the head of the colony, was like, I'm gonna fight for this, baby. We're not taking this over my dead body, right? The British were like, you taking a piss? We're gonna marmalize you. We're gonna knock 7 shades of out of you. Yeah, that's a bad accent, I know. But anyways, the 93 richest merchants beneath Stuyvesant of the colony were like, dude, we actually don't want to fight this. We're gonna get our asses kicked. So they signed the Articles of Capitulation, which gave them basically favorable terms in the handover to the British, and left kind of their way of life in place, which is interesting because this is kind of what made New York what it is today. Those like things in New Amsterdam, the capitalistic, mercantilistic elements, the openness, the diversity, as well as the democratic elements that were kind of in place, all kind of stayed put. And that's one of the reasons why it's different from New England today. There's actually a great book about this called Island Center of the World by Russell Shorto. You can read about this and learn more. And look, I know you guys don't like to read. That's why you're on YouTube right now. And don't worry, I actually read it for you. And I interviewed the author. That's right, you'll never have to read a book again. And you guys are lucky to have me. All right, well, named New York after James, Duke of York, Charles II's brother, who was king at the time. Eventually, James, Duke of York became king. I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, handed over to the British. That's Trinity Church behind me, that's why we're here. Trinity Church was actually a church established in 1697. This is the third building on the site. It was an Anglican church under the British, and today is still there, an Episcopal church, and like I said, third building on the site. First one was actually burned down at the beginning of the Revolution when all the Continental Army was fleeing the city. They conveniently burned down the church. They're like, you know what'll make them really pissed off if we burn down our own church? I don't know, I guess, some people just don't like going to Mass. But it got burned down then, and it also came down in the 1830s as well. Structural deficiencies and really cold winters and all that stuff, it just kind of came down, and then they built this one in 1846. Interesting. New York brownstone. I've talked about this in a million videos too. Let's keep it moving. We're doing history today. Colonial history. Colonial history. Yeah. All right, so the British have control of the area. They do lots of stuff here. In fact, they built this behind me. This is the first public park in New York City history, 1733, Bowling Green. That's right, first city park, meaning, people have been going on cheap dates since the 18th century here. Huh? I was thinking we'd just grab a coffee and walk through the park. Well, I've been very disappointed with how small it was, but that's been happening here since then. Now, in the middle of this park, there was actually a statue back in the day of King George. It was put there in 1766 because he was the guy who repealed the dreaded Stamp Act of 1765, which was one of the really annoying things passed by the British for the colonists. It was actually meant to pay back the debts incurred during the 7 Years' War. How long do you think that actual war lasted, Cam?
4.
Incorrect. So they put up a statue there, and they actually put this gate around it to protect them in 1771 because there was so much tension. We'll talk about this as well. But they put this gate around. An interesting fact, here's something you get a kick out of. July 9th, 1776. That's the day they read the Declaration of Independence for the first time here in New York. They didn't know anything about it until that day, July 9th. But remember, this is before Twitter, so you didn't have Thomas Jefferson going on there to brag about the Declaration. You had to hear it out loud. So they hear it out loud and everyone gets so amped up. They're so mad at the British that they come here right after and they tear down the statue of King George. They send it out of the city to get melted down for bullets to use in the War of Independence. That is pretty sick. Although kind of tame, I imagine, to what they would do here in New York if the Knicks ever won a championship. Probably melt down the Statue of Liberty and use it to fire bullets at the Boston Celtics. Yeah, all happened right here. And this fence here was the original fence from 1771. Pretty cool. They actually sawed off little things on top of here. You can still feel it's a little rough. They believe they sawed off crowns, things that were very indicative of the British because they were so angry. Could have been crowns, could have been, little baskets of fish and chips or little busts of Mr. Bean or something, I don't know. Either way, they sawed those off and sent them out too for bullets. Pretty crazy. All right here, Bowling Green with the British. The British were gonna get a real bad dose of revolution very soon. We'll talk about that though. So because the British were here, you're obviously gonna have slavery. Yeah, the British were big slave peeps, I guess that's what they're called. There was also slavery under the Dutch, but under the Dutch, believe it or not, in the 1600s, there were ways to become free. There was actually a freedman's kind of little colony in what is today Greenwich Village. But in the British, it got ramped up. I'm actually standing at the corner of Wall and Water Street, which is the site of what was the first slave market here in New York City. It was built to kind of keep freed slaves off the streets, keep people busy, and keep the market going, pretty much. Now keep in mind, New York was the second biggest slaveholding colony in the entire New World at one point, behind only Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah, that Charleston. In fact, 40% of all the people in New York lived in a household with at least one slave. 20% of the people in the colony at one point were enslaved people. Kind of wild, and also very important history, but kind of depressing to think about. So here's a picture of my cat. Yep. She just got spayed recently. It's kind of been tough. I just keep reminding her, hey, it's not as bad as slavery. So the colony starts to grow a little bit under the British. In fact, I'm in front of St. Paul's Chapel, which was built in 1766 as a chapel of Trinity Church. It was built outside the city, so far away. It's like 4 blocks from basically Trinity Church, but built kind of on the outskirts of their Anglican church. Interesting fact, this is actually where George Washington, after he was inaugurated as first president of the United States on April 30th, 1789, this is where he came to pray. Or if he's like politicians today, where he came to pretend to pray. You can actually go in there and see where his like little pew and everything is. He came here because Trinity Church was actually burned down at the beginning of the American Revolution. I don't know, I guess when you're a colonist and you see the British coming, first thing you do, right before you leave, you burn the church down. Makes a lot of sense, I guess. Just a nice excuse to burn down the church. You can see, in 1766, colony was slowly creeping outside of where the wall of Wall Street was built. Like I said, in 1653, under the Dutch, it was actually torn down in 1699, expanding. And also, the British didn't need a wall to protect themselves from the British. So, anyways, we're rambling. All right, so we talked about how the British colony of New York is starting to slowly grow. We already mentioned a little bit how tensions were starting to slowly rise with the colonists, and the British just wouldn't leave them alone, huh? Well, I'm actually standing in a little place where they say, arguably, the first real skirmish of the American Revolution took place. This is something you can go to barroom trivia and get into arguments about, because that'll really impress all your friends. Lord knows it's really impressive when your friend gets into a screaming match with a random stranger over American Revolution trivia. But January 19th, 1770, they say the Battle of Golden Hill was the first real skirmish of the Revolution. It took place around a liberty pole that was located right here. So liberty poles were going up in the late 1760s, early 1770s as kind of symbols of the colonists' kind of disdain for the British. Remember the taxes, also the soldiers that were being quartered everywhere to kind of enforce these kinds of rules and things were starting to really be a drag. Anyways, they were putting up liberty poles here in this spot. There's actually still one here kind of commemorating that. And this was where the barracks was located. I'm actually right next to City Hall, the barracks of the British. So along with liberty poles, you had handbills being posted by both the British and the colonists, and these were kind of like propaganda, kind of trashing the other side. So what happened was the British were posting some of these handbills, so colonists showed up to kind of get them to stop. In fact, these two very important leaders at the time, Isaac Sears and Walter Quackenbush, they came together and brought some of the quacking bushwhackers, I guess they called themselves, I don't know. But they showed up and started to harass the British. The British leave, run into more troops, reinforcements, and then they counter-harass. It becomes a whole thing. They start to get into a huge fight, and people are stabbed, people are punched, kicked, spit on. It was a big melee. It doesn't sound like much. In fact, you probably get worse on the 2:30 a.m. train out to Long Island on the weekends. But back then, that was, they say, the first skirmish. It was like 6 weeks before the Boston Massacre. So, could be that this was kind of the beginning of the American Revolution, the Battle of Golden Hill. And they still have the Liberty Pole there to kind of commemorate all that. Different time back then. Remember, this was all boiling up before the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Sorry, I was close. All right, we still got more to cover, man, but this is another thing right next to City Hall. All right, so War of Independence, American Revolution begins, and this is actually the headquarters. New York City is the headquarters for the British during the entire Revolution. I talked about the Battle of Long Island, I've talked about the Battle of Kips Bay, I've talked about the Battle of Harlem Heights. Big deal. This is where it all kind of went down right at the beginning. Anyways, it's also here where it all kind of ended. So I'm standing in front of Evacuation Day Plaza, and right underneath the flagpole here, you can see this is where the Charging Bull of Wall Street is, and you can see everyone just hanging out, touching the bull's balls. Some jokes never get old, man. It's gonna be 2739 we're going to be living in like, you know, apocalyptic bunkers and people will still be telling ball jokes. Pretty cool. Anyways, they say it's good luck to touch the balls of the bull, which is why it's the cleanest part of the entire statue, and everyone in line is a future millionaire. It's called Evacuation Day Plaza because on November 25th, 1783, this is where George Washington and some of his officers triumphantly entered back into the city to reclaim the city for the new United States. They're riding on their horses all the way down, you know, with their sunglasses on, smoking their Black and Milds or whatever, you know, really cool guys. And they came here. And in fact, it's here where there's a light post, or not a light post, a friggin' flagpole. Now, what the British did before they left, supposedly, was they greased this flagpole and put a Union Jack flag on the top with no way to get it down, which is a really like immature thing to do for, you know, considering there was just a bloody war of independence. You know, it's something like Dennis the Menace would do. But, you know, they did it. It was greased. They didn't know what to do. This guy named John Van Arsdale, a sergeant in the Continental Army, put on some cleats and climbed up and ripped it down. Pretty cool, really. And actually, Evacuation Day used to be celebrated basically like July 4th for a very long time, but not anymore. But yeah, John Van Arsdale climbed up and ripped it down. But we got more to cover, baby. I'm actually standing in front of one of the important locations during the Revolution and after. This is France's Tavern. Now, there's actually been a tavern here since the 1760s. 1762, a tavern's opened by a man named Samuel Francis. This building is actually a recreation built in the early 1900s, but it served a lot of different purposes. Now, during the actual Revolution and before, this is where a lot of planning was done by one of the revolutionary groups called the Sons of Liberty, which sounds like the direct opposite of the Sons of Anarchy, but they would come here and they were actually planning things like the New York Tea Party, which almost happened before the Boston Tea Party, except the shipment of tea that was going to come to New York Harbor was delayed. So who knows, history might have been completely different. Now, it was also here that during the Revolution and after, the British received the escaped enslaved people who came to fight for the British in return for their freedom. In fact, two of those escaped slaves were of George Washington himself. They escaped his plantation. They're like, screw this, we're getting out of here. Now, interestingly enough, it was here where they all met right before evacuating the island and were taken to Nova Scotia. I don't know if you guys knew this, there was a huge, I guess, wave of migrants, escaped slaves and freed slaves under the British who moved to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Like 3,000 people all at once. That's gonna change the neighborhood pretty quick. The people there were like, what the hell? Halifax, Nova Scotia had a huge, you know, I guess, migration of escaped enslaved people. Kind of wild. Anyways, it was also here where George Washington said goodbye to all of his officers on December 4th, 1783. They actually have a little museum up there. He brought them all here, tear-filled farewell, you know, said like, yo, dude, wasn't that so sick when you like blew that redcoat's head off? And dang, man, you were so cool out there, that kind of stuff. And then they all just chatted and hung out, signed each other's yearbooks, you know, told each other that, yeah, man, I'm definitely gonna write you, man. We gotta stay in touch. No, seriously, I know you're saying this and it sounds like we're just saying it, but let's stay in touch. And then they never talked again. Remember, taverns were a very important part of planning, of social life. The first city hall here in what was New Amsterdam was actually a bar, which I guess in some neighborhoods here hasn't changed. But yeah, kind of interesting. Not just for getting wasted and puking in the street, you know? All right, let's keep it moving. All right. Totes Cash here, right in front of our kind of last stop. This is actually Federal Hall National Monument. Very important spot because this kind of rounds out the colonial history of New York. Because on April 30th, 1789, this is where George Washington was sworn in as first president of the United States. I think there's a bike tour that just went by behind me. Glad I'm not giving those, I'll tell you that. Anyways, this is where he was sworn in. In fact, it's a museum now. You go inside, you can actually see the Bible that he swore in on. Pretty cool. His little Bible, still marked up with all his, you know, markings and stuff, probably. I don't know. Anyways, this is where it all kind of ends and then becomes part of the United States. It was a capital of the United States briefly until it went to Philadelphia temporarily, then to DC. That was kind of part of a deal between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. I've talked about that in other videos. But yeah, it becomes part of the US, baby. That's right, New York City, huh? How about that? All right, well, this is where the story, the colonial story kind of ends, so let's go to the last stop and wrap this baby up. Holy Lord, it's hot. I'm sweating bullets. Yeah. man, we have suffered through some heat today, baby. Holy Lord. My pits are sweating. Sorry, but anyways, we covered a lot, man. We covered New Amsterdam. We covered the discovering of this area. We covered the British takeover. We covered the British exit, Brexit, if you will, from New York. But yeah, man, we covered a ton. A lot of history there. Cam, did you learn something today?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right. You respect your elders. Good to have you back, by the way. Cam hurt his foot playing soccer. That's what you get for being active. That's why I preach being as inactive as possible. Anyways, guys, if you liked it, like and subscribe. Also, check out the Patreon. Huge help on these things. Remember, new world, baby. It's how we're gonna keep cool stuff like this from, from not being created. You know what I mean? Anyways, guys, all right. I don't know what more to say other than hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around this far. See y'all later. Sick.